Hey guys, it's Tiffany, and today I'm here with episode 7 of my teaching history mini-series. I can't believe I'm already on episode 7. I feel like I just started doing these and yeah, almost done. But today is going to be all about Unit 7, Africa. So this is Africa in the Middle Ages. So I'm talking about the African kingdoms, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Mansa Musa's Hajj, famous leaders like Sundiata, Sunni Ali, and the impacts of Islam on West Africa, the golden salt trade, the trans-Sahara trade routes, all of these things that happened. Now for my students, this was the first time that they covered this information, and for a lot of you, it probably will be too. So I'm going to share what I did. And if you want to know how I taught this unit, then stick around. So when I taught this unit my first time, it was the first time that I had ever covered these, either as a learner or a teacher. So that was a pretty interesting experience. This was something new to me, but once I took the time to educate myself on it, I fell in love with this unit, and I really had to wonder, why didn't I get to learn about the African kingdoms when I was in school? This is so much fun. My students enjoyed it. It was great, but it only lasted for 2 weeks. Now, for me, this unit fell right at the end of January and the first few days of February, so it didn't actually fall in Black History Month in entirety, but it did lead up to it, and then we started February with this unit, so that was a nice coincidence. But I did not intentionally teach this unit for Black History Month. That's just where it fell on the curriculum map, which I think is perfect, because as I've seen a lot of discussions lately, we need to start the discussion about Black history, where Black history actually begins, and it doesn't start as slaves or with the civil rights movement. It actually begins with powerful kingdoms in Africa. Now, when I tell you that I had 2 weeks on the curriculum map to teach this, that actually means that I had 8 days, not 10 days, because I do a whole day for review and then the last day is the test. So in 8 days, I had to get in the impact of geography, the role of Islam, the 3 great kingdoms, the gold and salt trade. All of those things had to happen very quickly. So for me, as usual, I made the test first. There were a lot of images on here because one of the key things about Africa that they had to know was the impact of geography. So you had the Sahel, where there wasn't a huge money-making resource present, but because of their geography, with the salt in the desert above them and the gold down in the rainforest below them, the need to trade these items, because of their location, that was beneficial to them. So they have to understand the geography of Africa. So there were a lot of images on this test. There was one major short answer essay where they had to pick 2 of the kingdoms and describe their achievements and all of that stuff. You can see here is the Vocab Foldable. There were only 6 words on this vocab because, like I said, we only had a very small amount of time to teach it. So I tried to focus on just the most key terms, which is really what you should do anyway with vocabulary. Once you get past 10, 12 words, it's really not a beneficial activity for them anymore. We started with mapping, as I usually do. It will be linked down below, and it is a PowerPoint that we go through where they get the information for the Mediterranean, desert, Sahel, savanna, and forest regions. And then on the inside, they actually had instructions to complete a mapping activity to map out the vegetation zones, and then to label the gold fields, the salt fields, and the kingdoms, and some of the key cities. I've taken this information and everything that I'm going to talk about today, and I've created a digital activity, which you are seeing a preview of now. So if you are trying to move into a more paperless classroom, or you wanted to try an activity to see if that's something your class could do, this is available on my Teachers Pay Teachers. It basically covers all of the key things that I'm going to be talking about today in a more concise fashion, and it puts a lot of the work onto the students. So while it is guided and there are some things that's like labeling of the vegetation zones, it's mostly on them at that point. But for me, when I actually taught it, I utilized the paper versions. And if I were teaching it again this year, I probably would switch to that digital version. I like putting the responsibility on the students. I think they learn more, and I think it's a more valuable experience for them. And a teacher that I worked with, I will link her TBT down below. I don't believe this is in there, but she does make other things. She actually wrote this reading about culture, and they had to talk about different traditions such as storytelling from the griots, sculpture, music and dance, the importance of it, and then how did they know. So where did they find it in the reading passage, which was a great activity. Then we had a PowerPoint presentation about the 3 great kingdoms. And as I said before, I converted this into a more concise amount of information, and it's part of that digital activity. But for us, we completed a PowerPoint and guided notes, and you'll see, as with all of my guided notes, there are discussion questions in there. This was just a lot of information to do all 3 kingdoms, and I think having them do it themselves, where they take breaks and they watch movies, or they stop reading or stop getting information, have to look something up or see a video or do something different, I think that ability to mix it up in a digital activity is a really good thing. Then, and I hope I can find this and link it for you down below, we actually did a reenactment of the gold and salt trades. This is a really easy activity to control the noise and excitement on, because if they're not silent bartering and they get loud, they don't get to participate anymore, because you're supposed to be simulating the silent bartering. There was a foldable, well, we turned it into a foldable. It was initially just a regular PDF, and I'm hoping I can link it for you. But they had to fill out the inside, and another teacher at my school did this also. She took them and copied and pasted them in, and they had to complete that. That was probably the best activity. I played some African music while they were doing this. I'll link down below the group that I used. All right, so once we had covered that, I wanted to go, and we had just learned Islam, which was great. We learned about what Islam was and all of that, but Islam in West Africa played a huge role. It came in because of trade, and then eventually, once you get to the Songhai or Songhai, depending on how you want to pronounce it, once you got to that kingdom, you would see that Islam becomes the official religion, and so it played a major role. And Mansa Musa's Hajj during the Mali Empire was one of the most famous pilgrimages in the world. So it was important for them to understand the role of Islam. So I have a PowerPoint and guided notes that went with that, and then a discussion question at the end and guided notes. I will also link that below. So the next thing that we did after covering Islam in West Africa was go more in depth about Mansa Musa's Hajj specifically. And there is a DBQ available, or a mini Q. I will link a PDF that you can access online down below. But I took that PDF and I just made it more visually appealing. I was really just testing out a theory that if these things weren't so dull and boring and cluttered and crushed, would students be more into looking at it? And the good thing about this is it's also available on Google Slides. So my kids actually accessed a digital version of this, which they really enjoyed. But we did all the sources, A, B, C, and D, the background essay. And then I really, if you've seen, or you can click on it and see below, you can see I really just cleaned it up. So it's bigger, it's easier to see, and it's just more visually appealing. And then I put the questions on the back. Some of the questions I changed a little bit to make them really what I wanted the students to be looking for. There was a foldable that went with that, by the way. So they had the same questions that were on the backs of each of the pages. They also had a foldable that corresponded with that they answered all those questions on. They then had a link, and remember, this was on Google Slides for them, so they just clicked the link and they watched the TED Ed about Mansa Musa's Hajj. So that was a really fun video. It talks about the amount of wealth that he pushed out as he was on this pilgrimage, so that was really interesting to them. And then they were put into groups, and each group was supposed to be a master of one of the sources, and they had to be able to tell me what the importance of this source was. Like, what does this tell us about Mansa Musa's Hajj and why it mattered and why it was important? And each group made one slide in a class Google Slides presentation and they had to come up and present it. So they analyzed the sources as a group, they answered the questions, then they made a presentation, and then they presented. And that was how I did this DBQ. So there was no 5-paragraph essay. They were still analyzing the sources and putting in the work. The last thing that we did was a review day where we played Kahoot or quizzes, whichever I had made, and they completed their study guide. And then after that, I went ahead and gave them their Middle Ages vocab. And that was it for that unit. Africa was very short, but it was a very fun unit. They loved the reenactment. They enjoyed learning about something that they'd never, most of them, even heard about before. They liked the videos that we used, and I think they just overall enjoyed the activities that went on in this unit. Now, like I said earlier, I would probably switch all that I'd done into that digital activity that I've created, because I think they would enjoy it even more, being able to take control of their learning, which is something that I am pushing myself to prepare for, to do in the future. Let me know down in the comments if you teach this unit. Did your kids enjoy it? Was this the first time that they learned about the African kingdoms? What activities did you do? Did you find any cool resources? And don't forget, I don't mention every video or resource per se. I try to mention every resource, but definitely not every video that I use. I use them as usual for Edpuzzle, for warm-ups, things like that. So if you check the description box, you can find all of those links. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful to you in some way. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so you can come back and hang out with me and see what I'm talking about next. Alright guys, I will see you in my next video all about medieval Europe. Bye!